Welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to explore one of the most amazing and shocking stories in the Bible. It's the story of how God turned a powerful king into an animal. Yes, you heard that right, an animal. This king was called Nebuchadnezzar, and he was one of the most important rulers in the ancient world. Have you ever wondered what could make God do something so extreme? What would cause the Almighty to humble a king in such a dramatic way? Well, today we're going to find out together. This story teaches us important lessons about pride, power, and how God is in control of everything. Before we begin, let me tell you about this incredible king. King Nebuchadnezzar II wasn't just any ordinary king. He was the ruler of Babylon, one of the greatest empires that ever existed. He ruled from about 605 to 562 years before Christ was born. During his time as king, Babylon became the most powerful nation in the world. Babylon was famous for many things. The city was incredibly rich and beautiful. It had amazing buildings and gardens. In fact, one of the most famous things about Babylon was something called the Hanging Gardens. These gardens were so beautiful that people called them one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. Even today, historians still talk about how magnificent these gardens must have been, but Nebuchadnezzar wasn't just known for building beautiful things. He was also a great military leader. He conquered many countries and made them part of his empire. One of the most important conquests he made was when he defeated the nation of Judah. This was the country where God's chosen people, the Israelites, lived. In the year 586 before Christ, Nebuchadnezzar did something that changed history forever. He destroyed Jerusalem, which was the holy city of the Jewish people. He tore down the walls of the city, burned down the temple where the people worshipped God, and took thousands of Jewish people as prisoners to Babylon. This event is called the Babylonian exile, and it was a very important moment in the Bible. Now, you might be thinking, if Nebuchadnezzar was such a powerful king, why would God need to humble him? Well, that's exactly what we're going to discover today. The answer has everything to do with pride and forgetting who really gives us our power and success. Even though Nebuchadnezzar was not a believer in the God of Israel, God still used him for his purposes. The Bible tells us that God allowed Nebuchadnezzar to become so powerful. But there was a problem. Nebuchadnezzar began to think that all his success came from his own strength and wisdom. He forgot that God was the one who had given him his power. The first time we see God trying to teach Nebuchadnezzar an important lesson was through dreams. You see, Nebuchadnezzar had some very strange and troubling dreams that kept him awake at night. These dreams worried him so much that he called all the wise men, magicians, and fortune tellers in Babylon to help him understand what the dreams meant. But none of them could help him. Then something amazing happened. There was a young Jewish man named Daniel who had been taken to Babylon as a prisoner. Daniel was different from all the other wise men because he had a special gift from God. He could understand the meaning of dreams because God showed him what they meant. When Daniel interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's first dream, he told the king something very important. He said that Nebuchadnezzar's power and authority came from God, not from his own strength. Daniel explained that God was the one who had made Nebuchadnezzar the ruler of such a great empire. He told the king that God controls who becomes powerful and who loses their power. But even after hearing this truth, Nebuchadnezzar didn't really change his heart. He continued to be proud and to think that he was the most important person in the world. He even built a huge golden statue and commanded everyone in his kingdom to bow down and worship it. When some of Daniel's friends refused to worship the statue, Nebuchadnezzar became very angry and threw them into a fiery furnace. But God miraculously saved them from the fire. Even after seeing this miracle, Nebuchadnezzar still didn't fully understand that God was much more powerful than he was. His heart remained proud and stubborn. Then came the second dream, and this one would change everything. This dream was even more troubling than the first one. In this dream, Nebuchadnezzar saw a huge tree that grew so tall it touched the sky. The tree was so big that people from all over the world could see it. It had beautiful leaves and lots of fruit, and it provided food and shelter for all the animals and birds. But then, in the dream, a holy messenger came down from heaven with a shocking command. The messenger said, "Cut down the tree, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let all the animals run away from it." But the messenger also said something else. "Leave the stump in the ground, but tie it up with chains of iron and bronze." When Nebuchadnezzar woke up from this dream, he was very frightened. He knew it meant something important, but he didn't know what. Once again, he called all his wise men, but they couldn't help him. Finally, he called for Daniel. When Daniel heard the dream, he was very sad because he knew what it meant. Daniel loved and respected the king, even though the king had conquered his people. With a heavy heart, Daniel explained the meaning of the dream. Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar that the big tree in the dream represented the king himself. Just like the tree was tall and strong and could be seen from far away, Nebuchadnezzar was a powerful king whose fame had spread all over the world. Just like the tree provided food and shelter for animals, Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom provided safety and prosperity for many people, but then Daniel had to give the king some very bad news. He explained that the command to cut down the tree meant that Nebuchadnezzar was going to lose his power and his kingdom. Daniel told the king that he would be driven away from people and would live like a wild animal in the fields. He would eat grass like a cow and sleep outside in the rain and dew. This strange punishment would last for 7 years. Daniel explained that this would happen because Nebuchadnezzar needed to learn an important lesson. He needed to understand that God is the one who really controls all the kingdoms of the world. God is the one who decides who becomes a king and who loses their power. Until Nebuchadnezzar learned this lesson and admitted that God was more powerful than he would have to live like an animal. But Daniel also gave the king some hope. He told him about the stump that was left in the ground. This meant that after Nebuchadnezzar learned his lesson, God would give him back his kingdom and his power. God wasn't going to destroy him completely. He was going to teach him an important lesson about humility. Daniel also gave Nebuchadnezzar some very wise advice. He told the king that if he would stop being proud and start doing what was right, maybe God would not have to punish him. Daniel encouraged the king to be kind to poor people and to stop doing wrong things. If Nebuchadnezzar would humble himself and start obeying God, perhaps this terrible punishment could be avoided. But sadly, Nebuchadnezzar didn't listen to Daniel's advice. For a whole year after having this dream, the king continued to be proud and to act as if he was the most important person in the world. He didn't change his ways, and he didn't humble himself before God. Then, exactly 1 year after the dream, something happened that changed everything. Nebuchadnezzar was walking on the roof of his beautiful palace in Babylon. From up there, he could see his entire kingdom spread out before him. He could see the magnificent buildings, the beautiful gardens, and all the wealth and power that belonged to him. As he looked out over his kingdom, Nebuchadnezzar's heart filled with pride. He couldn't help but brag about everything he had accomplished. He said out loud, "Look at this great Babylon that I have built. I built it with my own power and strength, and I built it to show everyone how great and mighty I am." These words showed just how proud Nebuchadnezzar had become. He was taking all the credit for Babylon's greatness. He was acting as if he had done everything by himself, without any help from God. He had completely forgotten that God was the one who had given him his power and success, but God heard every word that Nebuchadnezzar said, and he was not pleased. Before the king could even finish speaking, a voice came from heaven. The voice said, "King Nebuchadnezzar, your time as king is over. You will be driven away from people and will live with wild animals. You will eat grass like a cow, and you will stay like this for 7 years until you learn that God is the one who really controls all kingdoms." And immediately, everything that God had said would happen began to happen. Nebuchadnezzar lost his mind and could no longer think clearly like a human being. He was driven out of his palace and away from all the people in his kingdom. He began to live like a wild animal in the fields outside the city. The great king, who had once worn beautiful clothes and lived in a magnificent palace, now crawled around on the ground like an animal. He ate grass like a cow and slept outside in the rain and dew. His hair grew long and wild, like the feathers of a bird, and his fingernails grew long, like the claws of an animal. He couldn't speak properly anymore, and he couldn't remember how to act like a human being. Can you imagine how shocking this must have been? One day, Nebuchadnezzar was the most powerful king in the world, living in luxury and giving commands to millions of people. The next day, he was crawling around in the dirt, eating grass and unable to even remember who he was. For 7 long years, Nebuchadnezzar lived this way. He was completely cut off from human society. He couldn't rule his kingdom anymore. He couldn't enjoy his wealth or his power. He was just a wild creature living in the fields, completely dependent on God for everything. But why did God choose Such a strange and harsh punishment. Why did he turn Nebuchadnezzar into an animal instead of just taking away his kingdom? The answer is that God wanted to teach Nebuchadnezzar and all of us some very important lessons. First, God wanted to show that he is the one who really controls everything. No matter how powerful a person becomes, they are still under God's authority. God can give power to anyone he chooses, and he can take it away just as easily. Second, God wanted to show how dangerous pride can be. Pride makes us think we are more important than we really are. It makes us forget that everything we have comes from God. When we become too proud, we start to think we don't need God anymore. But God's punishment of Nebuchadnezzar shows us that pride always leads to a fall. Third, God wanted to show his mercy and love. Even though Nebuchadnezzar had been proud and had done wrong things, God didn't destroy him completely. Instead, God gave him a chance to learn and change. The punishment was meant to help Nebuchadnezzar, not to destroy him forever. After 7 years of living like an animal, something wonderful happened. Nebuchadnezzar began to remember who God was. He looked up toward heaven and started to pray. As soon as he did this, his mind became clear again. He could think like a human being once more, but Nebuchadnezzar was not the same person he had been before. His heart had completely changed. Instead of being proud and thinking only about himself, he began to praise and worship God. He said, "I praise and honor God who lives forever. His kingdom lasts forever and ever. He controls everything in heaven and on earth. No one can stop him from doing what he wants to do." Nebuchadnezzar finally understood that God was much greater and more powerful than he was. He realized that everything he had accomplished had only been possible because God had allowed it. He learned that true greatness comes from recognizing God's power and authority, not from thinking we are great by ourselves. As soon as Nebuchadnezzar humbled himself and acknowledged God's power, God restored everything to him. He got his kingdom back, his advisors came back to serve him, and he became even more powerful than before. But now he was a different kind of king, one who knew that his power came from God and who was grateful for everything God had given him. This amazing story teaches us many important lessons that are still relevant for us today. First, it teaches us about the danger of pride. Pride is one of the biggest problems that people face. When we become successful or accomplish something good, it's easy to start thinking that we did it all by ourselves. We forget that God is the one who gave us our abilities, our opportunities, and our strength. The Bible warns us many times about pride. It tells us that pride comes before a fall, which means that people who are too proud will eventually face problems. Nebuchadnezzar's story is a perfect example of this truth. Second, this story teaches us about God's authority over everything. God is the one who controls all the kingdoms and governments of the world. He decides who becomes a leader and who loses their power. This doesn't mean that God agrees with everything that leaders do, but it does mean that he is ultimately in control of history. Third, this story teaches us about God's mercy and love. Even though Nebuchadnezzar had been proud and had done wrong things, God didn't give up on him. Instead, God found a way to humble him and teach him important lessons. God's goal wasn't to destroy Nebuchadnezzar, but to help him become a better person. Fourth, this story teaches us about the importance of humility. Humility means recognizing that we are not the most important people in the world and that we need God's help in everything we do. When we are humble, we give credit to God for our successes and we are grateful for everything he has given us. Finally, this story teaches us that it's never too late to change. Even after 7 years of punishment, when Nebuchadnezzar finally humbled himself, God immediately forgave him and restored his kingdom. No matter how proud or stubborn we have been in the past, God is always ready to forgive us and help us start over if we are willing to humble ourselves. So what does this mean for us today? It means that we need to be careful not to let pride take control of our hearts. When we achieve success in school, work, or any other area of life, we should remember to thank God and give him the credit. We should remember that every good thing we have comes from God. It also means that we should be humble and kind to other people. We should not think we are better than others just because we have more money, education, or success. Instead, we should use whatever God has given us to help others and to make the world a better place. Most importantly, this story reminds us that God loves us and wants what is best for us. Sometimes God has to discipline us or allow difficult things to happen in our lives to teach us important lessons. But his goal is always to help us grow and become better people. If you find yourself struggling with pride, remember Nebuchadnezzar's Story. Remember that true greatness comes from humility and from recognizing God's power in your life. If you have been taking credit for things that God has done, it's not too late to change. You can humble yourself before God right now and ask Him to help you have a grateful and humble heart. Thank you so much for joining us today as we explored this incredible story from the Bible. I hope you learned something valuable and that this story will help you in your own life. The story of King Nebuchadnezzar shows us that no matter how powerful or successful we become, we always need to remember that God is the one who is truly in control. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please give us a thumbs up by clicking the like button. It really helps us know that you're enjoying our content, and it helps other people find these important Bible stories too. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our future videos where we explore more amazing stories and lessons from the Bible. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What part of Nebuchadnezzar's story stood out to you the most? Have you ever struggled with pride in your own life? What lessons from this story do you think are most important for people today? Please share your thoughts with us and with other viewers. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family members who might benefit from hearing this powerful story. Sometimes the people we care about most need to hear these important lessons about humility and God's love. Thank you again for watching, and may God bless you as you continue to learn and grow in your faith. Remember, the path to true greatness is found in humility before our great and loving God.